We're gonna get this 5 minutes back in the end.
Ultra efficient.
No, we just saying, okay, five is and then.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, the interesting thing though is the demand hasn't been met. There's still the demand out there. So that's why I'm like, I don't know how
Okay,
this is gonna
so how do I give you permission or what? permission?
But I think interest rates have gone up so much.
Yeah, I mean, so I had a bunch of apartments. We kind of thought
Record cloud.
we're still raising rents. And what we're finding is that the demand for the people that were buying homes,
Record.
so what happened to me here is my kids are, that's who's aggressive loss. I kind of feel bad, but I don't know I don't know how to feel about it because my kids are in that situation and you're never gonna get bad.
Oh, my grandkids are gonna start being there. How are they gonna even pay to go to school?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's what I'm gonna think. Maybe don't worry though, they'll just forgive it all.
Would be nice. Wish I could have a bunch of school debt.
All right, we're up and running.
We're up and running.
Yep.
Oh.
Okay, welcome everyone to Planning Commission meeting tonight. Happy to see you all here. We will start with an opening exercise, opening ceremony.
Wrong meeting.
Let's see here. Dwight. Dwight will lead us in the pledge, and Heather will give us a prayer.
Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our dear Heavenly Father, we are grateful to be here this evening as Planning Commission and as community members to review the things that are important to our community, North Logan City. We are grateful for those who are present and for their commitment and time and effort. And we pray that will help us to make good decisions and provide the needs that are asked for by our community members. And we say these things in the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Dwight and Heather, and welcome the whole Planning Commission. Way to go, everybody.
All here.
Nice to see you all. Hopefully everybody read Marie's email about the minutes. Hopefully everyone is getting the minutes.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, but first we need to adopt the agenda. So do I have a motion?
I motion to adopt the agenda.
Seconded.
Okay, Heather moved and Dwight seconded to adopt the agenda.
Aaron.
Oh, Aaron did? Okay. Aaron did to adopt the agenda. Oh, sorry.
Heather.
Okay.
I'll do this better.
Now we are going to approve the minutes. Do you have them written down? I don't know. Okay.
June 2nd.
June 2nd, July 7th, July 21st, August 18th, September 8th, and September 22nd. Can we do all that in one fell swoop, or do we have to do one at a time? Okay. Anybody have a motion to approve? Any changes that anybody saw?
I motion
No
to approve
changes.
all these agendas with no changes.
Okay, we have a motion to approve. Second.
I'll second.
Okay, Heather moved that we approve all those minutes, and Jeff second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, they're approved. Thank you, Marie.
Hey, we're all caught up. We're caught up.
September 6th. Yeah, we're
Good
caught up.
job, Marie.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Follow-up issues on previous meetings, Scott?
No issues, but just I guess to bring to everybody's recollection what we actually talked about last meeting, because we skipped our last regularly scheduled date. So it's been a few weeks. We talked about signage. One of the items on the agenda today is to have a public hearing and go back through that language if you guys are comfortable to make a decision on that recommendation. The other is to remind everybody about their training. If you have done that, feel free to shoot me an email or let me know if you have your certificate. I'd like to throw that in the file just to button it up and say we've done it. So
Scott, do you
That's
want to send out another link so
Sure.
everybody has it, please?
I will. I'll send it your way tomorrow.
Okay. I know I gave my certificate to Spencer. I bet he burned it, but I'll do it again.
He took it right to the shredder.
Yes.
No, me too.
Yeah.
My dog ate it.
Totally not.
Is that the QBC or something like that? You're supposed to be.
So Scott will send you a link that you can click on and
Yeah,
just
there's
whip through it.
a state website. You'll just set up an account and then there's some really good training for planning commissioners, public officials, just to give you guys an understanding of your role, what your authority is and what your expectations are. So
Scott, is that,
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah.
But I'll shoot it out just because why not?
is that training that has to be done periodically, or is it a one and done thing?
So state code requires that every planning commissioner have, I think it's 2 hours. I have to look and see exactly how much training are required every year. So it's an annual requirement.
Okay.
So every year you'll need to make sure. So when we get into 2023, maybe let's just rip the Band-Aid off and we'll do some training here in the planning commission and then we'll send out that link again. And there's actually a couple different trainings in that website. So you can choose something different if you're familiar with like parliamentary procedure and you want to learn about something else, there's other stuff to learn about. So yep, just a reminder.
Thank you.
Can item number 3 on the agenda account for part of that?
It possibly could, if we were to set it up as a training session. This is
training.
more of an update for you guys, but yeah, it's more of a formal training.
Okay. Anything else?
That's it from
Previous?
last meeting.
Okay, Scott, can you, before we go into this public hearing, can you give us information, please?
Yep. So what I'll do is I'll pop back into, if you'll recall in the Google Drive, we've got these folders, part of your meeting packet. So item 1 has got there's 2 things in here. So I put together an exhibit just to kind of help wrap our heads around what we're looking at. And then I don't know if you're familiar with a staff report. I don't know if Spencer used staff reports or memos or how he communicated these things to you in the past. But what I'm familiar with is a staff report just to give a synopsis and explanation of what it is we're doing. Kind of like a cover memo, so to speak. And then below as an exhibit is the actual proposed language that we'll be looking at. So let me, I'm gonna open this up real quick.
I love this, by the way. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, I know this is kind of hard to see, so I'm gonna zoom in here. So before we jump into the staff report, I'm gonna open up this exhibit. This is kind of the example we were using of what we were calling a legally non-conforming freestanding business sign. It's a lot of words, but basically every business in the commercial oriented zones are allowed to have one freestanding business sign out on the road to advertise their business. And then they can also have some facade signs on their structure itself. The reason why this particular sign is considered non-conforming is because our current ordinance requires any new freestanding business signs to be monument style, which basically means that they're affixed to the ground. There's no pole. The base of the sign is integrated into the sign face and it's not as high. Additionally, new signage is not allowed to be quite as big as this either. So it's non-conforming, but it's grandfathered because it pre-existed our existing language. The reason why we're having this discussion is because the Cow Ranch store and others along Main Street have quite a bit of square footage that at times is underutilized, and they like to do tenant improvements on the inside to better utilize that commercial square footage for an individual tenant's needs. Some tenants need more square footage, some need smaller storefronts, and so they can kind of have that flexible space inside of a building. But our language right now only allows for a single sign out on out on the main street, and it does not allow for co-location or multi-tenant representation. So basically, any subtenant would have to just rely on their facade signage to gain attention from Main Street, which could be viewed as not as business friendly. You know, a new business is trying to get their name out there, and it's hard to find if they're one of the smaller, if they're not an anchor tenant in a shopping complex, for example. So in working with the economic development team, this was an item in our ordinance that was viewed as potentially being a roadblock to some businesses wanting to locate here in the city. We had actually a couple of businesses mention that, hey, there's not the greatest of language in the signage ordinance, and let's take a look at it. So we said, sure, let's take a look. Anyways, what you see here is just kind of a rough representation of what we talked about last time of allowing co-location on an existing sign. This existing sign is non-conforming. Our language as it currently is drafted would not allow for modification of this sign. It would basically require them to tear it out, start over, and build a new sign, which, you know, in some instances, that might be a good thing to say it's time for change. It's time to just build a new sign if we're going to have new tenants move in. But there's also kind of that chicken and an egg question of, do we want to be business friendly to attract business, or do we want to be, you know, more strict and then hopefully have those businesses come in regardless? So what we discussed is allowing for co-location on a legally non-conforming sign, and each new tenant would be allowed to expand that signage by no more than 30%. So if you take this sign face and split it up into 3 pieces, it would kind of come down to here. But what we talked about is having a maximum square footage cap as well. And so as I was kind of looking at this, I said, okay, if we were to do, you know, a 30% increase for each additional tenant, this sign, for example, being probably one of the biggest non-conforming signs we have, this would be roughly about the maximum that we could expect if multiple tenants were to come in and take advantage of this language. If it gets much bigger than this, the area right now, 332 square feet total, this is, you know, roughly calculating that square footage, is quite a bit bigger than our existing signage language would allow. So just to give you perspective, our existing signage language for a new sign is capped at 120 square feet. So at 332 square feet, we're more than double. And so I felt, as far as a cap was concerned, I felt like we're getting pretty big. If I zoom out here, if you had a third panel below, I was looking at kind of proportionality, looking at it from a distance, it's getting pretty big. But you guys let me know, is that cap of 332 square feet adequate for 2 additional tenants to co-locate? Or if we add a third one on there, is it getting too big? So that just is to try to give you some perspective. We can jump into the language and I can show you how it's written in the ordinance form, the black and white language. But that's kind of what I use just to give me a rough estimation of what are we working with here. Okay.
Scott, would it be possible for more than 2 additional businesses to go in there? For example, maybe each one of those blue signs could be divided in half.
And have 4 businesses. Yeah.
Or a total of maybe 5 businesses there.
Yep.
4 plus cow ranch,
Yes.
something like that.
Yeah, the way that I have the language drafted is it allows for an infinite number of co-locations, but a maximum square footage of 332.
Okay.
But no more than 30% of the existing sign face can be expanded for a single tenant at a time.
So you're gonna have to talk slow for me.
Sure.
So the 332 feet, you just come up with that because that's what that sign would be if you took the 30% and the existing.
Yeah. And this is, if I'm correct, this is one of the largest non-conforming signs we
Okay.
have on Main Street. So this is kind of the worst case scenario is what I was kind of looking at. So that number is kind of a shot in the dark based on a 30% increase twice.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where that 332 comes from.
I like the percentage. I just struggle when we say 332 square
Kind of
feet
a random number.
because it's just arbitrary.
Uh-huh.
So I do like the percentage thing.
Yeah.
I guess I probably wouldn't die on that hill on the 332 square feet, but I don't know. It just,
So if you look at.
Somebody down the road's gonna be like, where did 332 feet come from?
Well, it's also a width and a height and a width.
Sure.
If you add those together,
Yeah.
you multiply, and that's what
Well,
you get.
I get that. I just the language in the code, it just, I don't know.
Kind of strange.
Yeah, that's probably my only thing with it is just, I really do like the percentage thing.
Proportionality.
Yeah,
Yeah.
versus
So
versus
30%.
stating a square footage.
Yeah.
out there.
Do you guys like the idea of a maximum square footage, a cap of some sort?
That was gonna be my question. Is there something that you could do if,
Well, and
you know, a percentage is needed, but then there's a cap, a maximum cap
the,
of square.
the
footage?
reason that I'm saying that is because we could have a non-conforming sign out there. I guess if you have the 30% and that maximum. Because I was worried about, say we have one that's half that size, but then that allows for a lot bigger
30%,
add-ons.
30%. Yeah.
I don't know.
multiple tenants.
Right, where that to meet that 300 or 332. That's
Yeah.
where I guess I feel strongly about that proportional thing, because I'd hate to have one half that size, but then someone feel like they have the ability to
Yeah.
get crazy with, I don't know.
So we could, as I'm kind of thinking through this, as we're talking, instead of a maximum square footage, we could say the original sign face not to exceed 40% of its original size.
Yeah.
So you can add multiple
something like
tenants,
that.
but we don't want it to quite double in size. So
Yeah.
there's still that proportionality. Keep that in mind. Let's read the language real quick
Yeah,
because I was trying to balance the non-conforming signage with new signage
Yeah.
and trying to allow co-location on non-conforming and new. And I was trying to balance those two. So let me show you what that looks like. And then we can kind of get a little bit more perspective. There we go. Okay, so the staff report, cover memo, whatever you want to call it. What we had talked about last time was we've got two things. We have non-conforming signage, legal non-conforming signage. We're trying to allow co-location on. We're also trying to allow for co-location on new signage, which is monument style signage as well. Okay. So I'm just going to hop down into the text, and this is where it gets a little hairy, just because there's multiple sections. I'll zoom in here. Just for those who are looking at the screen here, everything that is highlighted in yellow has nothing to do with what is proposed. It's just to kind of guide our eyes to sections that are somewhat applicable to this topic. So don't get hung up on the yellow highlights. What we're looking for are the red lines, what is being crossed out and what is being added. So I'm going to scroll through these top portions that are kind of just talking about definitions and so on, and get to the bottom. The first red lines you'll see is when we get into the definition of a freestanding business sign. I basically just changed things to be plural because now we will be allowing for more than one business on this sign face. So that's all that's doing there. If we go down further, we'll get into our permanent sign section where we're talking about these freestanding signs. I highlighted this just to make a note to myself. When this ordinance was originally passed, there was an idea of, hey, let's go out and do an inventory of all of our signage and let's mark what is legal conforming and what is legal non-conforming. And we had talked about having everybody come in and be re-permitted within 1 year. I don't know that if that actually happened or not, but the language technically is still in the ordinance. I toyed with just pulling it out, but I felt maybe we'll just let it be because it is what it is. Just FYI. Okay, getting down into the freestanding business sign table, where we're talking about is specifically in these commercial zones. So community commercial, general commercial, mixed commercial, and recreation and school is what that stands for, R-S. So these are kind
Can
of
you
similar
enlarge
zones.
that on the screen?
Yeah.
Please, thank you.
Yeah, there we go.
Oh, thanks.
Thank you. So right now we're saying that a new sign that were to come to us for a sign permit is capped at 12 by 12. But the cap is not 144 square feet, as we'll see below. We're basically saying you can go up to 12 in height and 12 in width, but I added a note saying to see the subsection below where we're adding a little bit more language. So that's just a note that was added. If we get down into the meat and potatoes here, trying to zoom in enough to where we can still see it all. Can you guys read that or is that still too far out? There we go. Suppose as close in as we can get. Okay, for single or master plan projects encompassing more than one legally existing lot, only one freestanding business sign is permitted for the project, no matter how many lots exist. So we're still saying we want one sign, so we're not cluttering the, the roadway. But what I've added here is this single sign may use co-location and ladder style to ensure each business or tenant in a master plan project can be represented on the freestanding sign. Additionally, in the CC, GC, MC, and RS zones, a freestanding business sign using co-location for additional project tenant signage may exceed the maximum allowable area, height, and width requirements as listed in subsection B1A, which is above in that table, subject to the following provisions. So we're saying that they may, if they're using co-location, they can exceed this 12 by 12 standard limitation. Okay. So in this situation, if they are co-locating more than one business on this single sign, we are saying that one, each additionally co-located sign may increase the base allowable dimensions of a freestanding business sign by no more than 30% in area, height, or width. So each additionally co-located. So each business, we're saying no more than 30% of the existing area, the 12 by 12, are you allowed to increase or exceed that amount? Okay. Number two, multiple co-locations may not exceed a maximum total area of 252 square feet, a maximum total width of 16 feet, and a maximum total height of 16 feet. Now, I pulled these numbers out of the air thinking this is kind of where I think it makes sense. So what I used as guiding, I guess, guidelines here is we're starting with a 12 by 12. That's the standard size. Okay. If we're co-locating additional signs, we will allow more signs to co-locate, but we'll let it go up to a maximum of 252 square feet, which is 16 by 16. So we're allowing it to go 4 more feet high and 4 more feet wide over the base allowable area and height. Okay. And I kind of pulled this 16 by 16 out of a hat, just saying, I think this feels about right for new signs on a monument. So the monument's down on the ground, remember. Let me go back.
So where does the 33? I'm trying to tie all this together. So, so 12 by 12 is the maximum proposed.
So 12 by 12.
If it's co-location, then you can do up to 33 in additional 33%
above that. So what we're saying is 120 square feet is your maximum area. That's what is allowed today. Okay.
Oh, okay.
So it's not a direct math equation. It's 12 times 12 is 144, right?
Right.
So we're saying you have to pick. You want to be 10 feet wide and 12 feet tall, or do you want to be vice versa? But you can't exceed 120.
That's the dimensions, but a maximum of 120 square feet.
Correct. Yep.
So, and then 33%. So you could go, I can do 12. I could have a height of 12 plus 33 or a width of 12 plus 33, or I could have 160 square feet.
But that's per additional co-location, right? So if they leased space out to 4 new businesses, each new business could add that 33%.
Yes.
Up to that cap that we were talking about.
Correct.
16 by 16.
That's right. So if you do the math, if you start with a base area of 120 square feet, and we say you can increase it by 30%, that basically means everybody can add another 40 square feet for each co-located business up to that cap.
Up to the 16 by 16 or
Yep, or
252.
252.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
And so these are just numbers I kind of pulled out, rough estimations of what I felt was the right scale and feel. We may want to chat. Do you guys feel like that scale and feel is correct? What I was kind of looking at, let me go back to our exhibit here.
Scott, can I ask a quick question on with the monument style signage? The co-location signage, would that go underneath, since it's already kind of on the ground, does that go underneath or does that go?
It could go underneath or on top or to the side. It's kind of up to you and your design. We don't specify.
And then if it's going higher, I'm assuming that it won't be blocking entrances or like vision of drivers and stuff. If it keeps
That's-
going higher, right? If
Yeah,
they're
that's already in there.
just as safe.
It's
That's
already language
included
we
there.
have, and it's not vertical distance, it's actually horizontal distance for sight triangles.
Triangle.
Okay.
Yeah, that language is, we're not touching that
Already.
language, it's already in the ordinance. Yep.
Scott, one question, is there a height limitation on the sign off the ground?
16 feet.
16 feet. Yep. So no poles. So these are new signs. We're talking, this is, so let's not confuse the pole sign as our example here. This is,
Okay.
this is an illegal sign. It's legal non-conforming, I should say. We would not permit this today if it were to come in for a sign permit.
20 years we will.
Maybe. But I was looking at this, and if you look at this and we say, okay, if this is 20 feet wide by 16 feet tall, if this was a monument sign affixed to the ground, that's getting pretty big
Yeah.
as a monument fixed sign. So that's where I said, let's not go that big. Let's pull it down to
Here,
about
yeah.
16 by 16 max.
Make it bigger sign if you're.
Right.
Because even,
Jeff, I'm curious, at your rationale for saying 20 years from now, we would
Oh,
be approving
It's
this.
from the meeting where we talked about this before.
Okay.
I'm hung up on the no pole signs.
yeah.
And I
What
just
was-
said
yeah.
that 20 years from now.
Personal
we're gonna
preference.
fix
It's
the
Let's
design.
not-
Yeah.
On no pole signs. Let's go with this. Let's
Yeah.
focus.
Oh, see,
Focus, focus.
Karen, where were you here a couple weeks
Focus.
ago? I got you, man. They were,
Okay,
they muted me.
I'm gonna use my little thing here. No pole.
No pole signs.
We're gonna
Madam
focus
Chairman.
on what Scott is talking about right now. Oh, my goodness.
See?
Getting serious out there.
So does that make sense how I kind of rationalized the 16 by 16?
Mhm. Yeah.
I kind of felt like if we were to take this existing sign plus the two blue co-located tenant signs and we were to bring that pole down all the way to the ground level, I feel like that's getting pretty big
Mhm.
Yeah.
for what we'd want on the ground level.
And it will turn into a moment.
You don't like that?
Mhm.
I don't like monument signs because they
Oh,
block the
see?
view of the.
Karen,
They will block the view if they're in the wrong location.
Yeah,
So
that's why I was worried about the driving, but
Yeah.
the 16 feet thing.
you're right. So to answer that, our code as it's drafted, we're not changing this language, but it's currently drafted that if you're at a drive entrance to a shopping center, there's a view triangle. So if you're in your car at that drive entrance looking to turn into traffic, that sign cannot be located in that view triangle. So it has to remain clear and visually free for safety purposes.
So we're moving to pole signs is what I think.
Yeah.
Typically in a public hearing, they'll explain the item, so we have a public hearing, and you all speak about.
He's just still explaining it.
So. Thank
I
you.
think he's just still doing the background.
so be quiet and
We
listen to
haven't started the
Scott.
public hearing
Yeah.
yet.
Yeah.
Otherwise, then I'd keep comments to myself.
Good,
Thank you for keeping us on track.
So-
Scott.
Have to
Go.
pull out the gavel more often and keep us on track, right? Okay, so that addresses this language as proposed addresses any new signage we would allow co-location on, okay? If we skip down a little bit further, I did pull out the language that prohibited ladder style because we want to allow ladder as a means for co-location. Okay. If we go further down, we'll start talking about the non-conforming language. One thing I wanted to highlight here and kind of bring to your guys' attention is here. So these are miscellaneous design standards, okay? For multi-tenant projects, freestanding business signs and wall signs that have a uniform complementary background, excuse me, shall have a uniform or complementary background in terms of color, illumination, material, and fabrication. All freestanding signs and their supporting structure shall be of the same background color and material unless the background color is a component of a registered trademark. I highlight this language because, sorry, you can't even read it. I highlighted this language because of our example we had at the last meeting of the sign over kind of by Big Five and the Y intersection in South Logan. This language is trying to alleviate that from occurring, where we can say, look, we can't have just a smorgasbord of colors. We have to have some uniformity unless it's a trademarked branded color scheme for the business that is using it. So if we're good with our enforcement, when we have a new sign permit come in for one of these co-located signs, we'll look at, is this somewhat organized and coordinated in its design language?
Mhm.
The
Okay.
trouble, well, the
Go ahead.
troubling with that language is uniform and complementary. How
It's
do you,
objective.
how do you enforce that?
Yeah. That's a good question. That's kind of up to the individual who is doing the review, which in this
Yeah.
situation would be me, but I'm not necessarily going to be doing this forever and ever doing sign review. So the language is there. It's up to an enforcement, quality of enforcement at that point. That's kind of true of any language, but unless you guys have ideas of how to beefing up this language a bit to where it is, we say you have to have a white background, you have to have a black background, you have to have, I don't know how to go about that. But I just wanted to highlight that to let you know there is something in there to try to have some coordination of design.
Mhm.
Okay.
It's another city center.
Let's scroll down here real quick.
We'll know it when we see it.
And then we'll talk.
Required replacement of non-conforming signs. Okay, so this is the language that basically says if you want to change your sign, too bad, you need to replace your sign. That's kind of how it read before. This isn't an attempt to try to bring everybody into conformance with the current standards. So if you want to modify your sign, you need to actually remove it and just put in one that conforms. What we're doing here is we're leaving the majority of this language be, but what we are adding is this co-location idea. So if there's an existing non-conforming freestanding business sign, we will allow that to stay and be modified for the purposes of co-locating additional businesses on the sign face. This kind of goes a little bit against the grain of traditional thinking when it comes to nonconformity and trying to bring about conformance. But it is something that we looked at as a roadblock for these businesses coming in. We thought, in other situations, we would still require people to replace their signs, but in this specific instance, we'll allow for the co-location. I did, however, if you see in item C down here below, I did leave a little bit of that in where I said legally non-conforming freestanding business signage may be modified structurally to accommodate the additional structural requirements of a co-located tenant signage, so long as the structural modifications do not require modifications to more than 50% of the existing structural components. Should the required modifications exceed 50%, then the signage would need to be replaced in conformance with the provisions of this section. So what we're saying, typically in non-conforming language, we say 25%. If anything is modified above and beyond 25%, we would say that's the threshold. You need to actually just replace it. This is a little bit more lenient, saying, look, you're going to have to do some structural modifications to allow for co-location because of the additional weight, I don't know what you call it, the shear value. I'm not an engineer, but you put more sign face on a sign pole, it creates a bigger sail, basically catches the wind. So you need to beefing up your structure to accommodate that. You're going to have to do some modification. And we understand that. We're saying you can up to 50%. At some point, I still feel like we need to have some line in the sand to say, look, you can't just replace the whole thing and install a non-conforming pole sign when the intent really ultimately is to try to get everybody onto a monument style sign. But if you're co-locating a business here or there and it doesn't necessitate more than 50%, then yeah, go ahead and co-locate is what we're saying. You guys feel comfortable with that number? Is 50% lenient enough? Is it too lenient?
I think it's good.
Okay. So the thing that I wanted, I guess, bring full circle here is this language allows for the maximum total width of 20 feet and a height of 16 feet. And the reason why I had to use 20 instead of 16 and 16 like we did with the conforming sign was because of this non-conforming sign being 20 feet wide. So we got to work with what we've got, right? And this being one of those sign faces we're trying to allow for co-location on. So that's why that's 20 by 16 instead of 16 by 16.
I guess, do you want to, since you're going 20 instead of 16, do you want to reduce the height so that it still has the same area overall?
The way that I said it was, let me read here. It says each additionally co-located sign shall not modify the existing legally non-conforming freestanding business signage by more than 33% in area, height, or width, and modified legally non-conforming freestanding business signage may not exceed a maximum total area of 332 square feet. So that's 20 by 16. May not exceed a maximum total width of 20 feet and may not exceed either 16 feet in height or the height of the existing legally non-conforming signage, whichever is greater. So that whichever is greater is kind of important, because if we were to say it can't be higher than 16 feet, then there's really no way for this sign to be modified because it already exceeds 16 feet. So what we're saying is you can't go any higher than what it already is because it's already non-conforming. So you need to bring it below or to the side if you have width to work with. But does that answer your question, Commissioner?
Yep, thanks.
Okay, that's kind of the crux of the text. Do you guys have any desired modifications before we button it up and move it forward?
Well, I'd like to hear the public's input.
Are we ready? Okay, we'll open up our public hearing. And I will read you the instructions. Before you begin, please state your name for the record. Please speak into the microphone so that your comments can be recorded. Please limit your statements to 2 minutes. If you are also speaking on behalf of others, you may ask the chairman for more time. Please phrase your opinions in the form of statements, not questions. A public hearing is your opportunity to express your opinions to the Planning Commission. It is not a time to ask questions and expect dialogue between yourself and the commission or city staff. Please address your comments to the commission, not to the public. The commission might ask questions about your comments in order for them to better understand you. If you have questions or need to discuss an issue, please meet with the Planning Commission members or the appropriate city staff member before the public hearing where dialogue can take place. You may provide a written statement as your input for a hearing. You may read your entire statement or summarize it. The 2-minute limit applies. You may provide a copy of a written statement to the city recorder. He will make copies for the commission. Written comments, if a copy is provided, become a part of the public record, but are not included in the minutes of the meeting. All right, we will open up this for public hearing. Anybody have a comment they would like to make? Okay, no comments, then we will close our public hearing. And commission, any comments you want to make? Changes, worries, thoughts?
I mistakenly already asked my questions earlier, so.
Okay.
I think we all did.
Thank you, Marie, for keeping us on task there.
No, you're
No,
okay.
it's all good.
And I have to apologize. I'm used to a dialogue before a public hearing. This is how we did it where I came from, but there's no right or wrong answer, I guess.
Well, I think we've done the dialogue we need. Now what do? We
So we do need. to
Well,
make-
no, we
Oh.
haven't. Yeah, so I'm very supportive of the modification. And with the only thing I don't like the trying to define the uniformity or whatever those 2 words were, just because it's not enforceable or it's left to interpretation. That's extremely frustrating as a business owner or developer or whatever.
Yeah.
So that's one area of concern. The numbers thing, I already shared with you my numbers thing with a 332 feet, but I'm not, I just won't tell anyone I was here when we made that decision. I like the percentage thing personally, but I'm very in favor of this and open. I think we need to be business friendly. As I drove in Logan today, I looked at signs everywhere, even including off of Main Street, Smith's First East, and there's pole signs, there's all sorts of signs, and so I don't get hung up on the monument signs, as you all know, that were here a couple weeks ago. And so, yeah, I think we need to be as business friendly as we can with those signs and allow them to do their thing. But I don't like the uniform and complementary background definition or lack of definition.
Sure.
And I will counteract Jeff's concerns. I think uniform language is fine.
What does it mean?
It means that Scott or whoever is Scott gets to decide if they comply or not.
How can we do that?
I think when we
say yes or
see
no.
the signs that we're trying to not look like, then I think we can go from there. But I'm okay with that language. How
Aren't we
about the
saying that
rest?
it's uniform with the rest of the signage that they're going
We're not
to be
saying,
co-located with?
No, we're saying
We
it shall have a uniform or complementary background. I think that what Commissioner Coleman is saying is how do you verify that it is uniform, or what are the standards through which you measure uniformity? My paraphrasing correctly?
yeah, well, that's
Right.
what, yeah, well, I mean, help me understand what uniform and complementary background in terms of color is.
I think you look at the sign that they're trying to add to and then decide, does this sign that you want to put up here complement the rest of the signs that are there?
But that's a subjective decision.
I
So
know.
As a
It is a
point of
subjective-
clarification, this language is pre-existing and we haven't proposed to modify it. I mean, I guess the book is open. If you want to make a suggestion for a modification, we can do that now. This is already in here. But I agree from a staff perspective, when I get a sign permit, I'm reviewing it. This is the language I have to back myself up with. I think more than anything, it allows for dialogue with the sign applicant to say, let's try to get this thing uniform or have some continuity of color. But you're right, there's not a letter of the law to fall back on and say, nope, it has to be all the exact same on the same color wheel, or all has to be on, primary colors. And those are, here are your color swatches. There's not that specificity, unfortunately, for us to go with.
Because then you have to just abide by whatever business came in first and they have a red background. So then is that kind of one of your concerns? Like everyone has to have a red background now because the first sign did, and now it's all conforming.
Well, my
Versus the white
concern is just that it's not defined.
Yeah.
So as a developer or a business owner, what does that mean? And so then there's all this back and forth, and it just depends on how Scott feels that day.
Yeah, you might
Well,
black
like
and white.
otherwise, we
And
have,
that's where I struggle with it. We'll know it when we see it. I hate the city center code for that reason, because it's not, and I understand the complexities around it, but as a developer or a business owner, that's very, how do I come in and work around that? And what works in one area may or may not work in another area. And so I'm going, what am I trying to do or prevent or do there? We're not dictating what someone paints the buildings as.
Yeah, I guess
So
it's
when
if you don't have this language, then you have to say, then all the signs have to be black with white letters.
Yeah.
You have to get really specific.
Yeah.
Well, when I read it, I think what they're trying to avoid like a neon pink with a neon green like clashing sign. But I actually, when I first read this, I thought it was supposed to be complementary, not complimentary. So, complement versus complement. I think there's, complementary colors. That actually is like a pretty scientific. You can get down to pretty. I'm not a color guy. I'm colorblind actually, but I know you can. There's science behind this where you can see.
Review.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I'll throw a dart. Yeah.
And maybe someday the person that has to decide is going to be colorblind too. It's not.
Yeah. Well, so complementary colors is actually like there's science behind that where you can get in pretty good specificity there. As long as we change that to be complementary and not complementary. Like we're not providing complements to the colors. We're actually looking at how they complement each other. But anyway, and then uniform, you're right. Uniform is kind of subjective, but I think not totally subjective. Like I think it would be universally agreed upon that some colors are not uniform with others.
But if there's a registered trademark. they
Yeah,
do whatever they want.
it's the branding and the trademark stuff that I don't know how you navigate that.
But we say that
It
it's
says in here
unless
you get
there's
to do
a,
it.
a national, whatever you call it,
Recognize,
trademark.
yeah, it says.
That language is in there. So if whoever
You're
Nike
Nike.
comes in,
You get-
then you get to use Nike colors.
get a
What's Nike?
Well, so if we're okay with it being a trademark, then why are we and that's okay, then why are we concerned about in general?
Because we
That's
don't
the
want it to look awful. I think that's why.
Hey, define awful, man. That's the
Heather,
problem as a
So,
government
Jeff-
entity.
Honest, what do you think we should say? To make it, if I'm coming in with a business and there's
I
already a
just think it should
monument
be
sign
left
there,
silent.
there's a monument sign there and I need to advertise my business. I'm okay with looking at this suggestion and saying, okay, this is going to be Nan's.
What I'm not
Bakery.
comfortable with is the subjectivity of somebody at the city without guidelines has to make a decision of that's acceptable or this is or this isn't.
Yeah.
So I think we would have 6 opinions right here.
So what I wanted to pull this up for was to just talk about one thing. Macy's, blue is their trademark, right? Dollar Tree, green is their trademark. Capriotti's, that is their trademark. You know, the black background with the red font below. Papa Murphy's, these are all trademark signs, right? But maybe what we could put in there is like, you do have to have a uniform color background. And maybe that's where you have black that delineates each sign. So they kind of pop out, but then you're still allowed to have the trademark on your actual sign face. But the uniformity comes in between signs where you have at least a little bit of separation and uniformity that ties maybe the posts to the other post, as opposed to our fine friend here where there's no delineation or separation and it's kind of a chaotic mess.
And I'm okay with that. I don't necessarily care one way or
can
the
see
other.
that.
What I'm okay with is it's defined.
So you
it's-
want
that
us to
it's-
put, you need black space between each sign.
Black space.
I'm happy
Black.
to write that in. I think that there's a bigger amendment to this signage ordinance that we could be working on at some point. We've actually started kind of moving the cog to maybe start looking at what is maybe an overhaul of our signage ordinance look like. And maybe this is one of the items we put on the parking lot to say this needs to be better defined and more specifically addressed. But if you'd like to tackle this now, because there's no guarantee as to when we'll be able to jump into the sign ordinance and really do a full overhaul. It kind of just depends on our staff priorities and staff availability. But I think low hanging fruit would be to say you have to have at least a little bit of uniform background between sign faces, and that background needs to be a uniform color.
And you're right, when you see that color between, it does make that sign look nicer than the one that's not.
Kind
I
of the
mean,
one.
that does make it look
A
nicer.
little bit more organized. Yeah.
So even though there are multiple colors and logos on there, it does look a little bit nicer.
It makes it
with that.
easier for me to read.
Mhm. It doesn't look
I
like
agree.
just a big blob. And so
Maybe
maybe
make
that's
it easier to read.
simple.
So I think that's good,
Separation between the businesses.
right?
I think that could be
An
We
easy
everyone
fix.
can agree upon, maybe.
I think
Yes.
if it's existing language, I'm fine to stand down.
But your point's well taken.
I
Yes.
Understand where you're coming
hate subjectivity in code.
And this is something we can, but right now,
We need
for,
to move with that.
for this
Yeah.
article, we need to move on this
Yeah,
action,
those
right?
businesses can get in.
Now, I think
When you
we're,
guys are ready. Yeah.
I think we're sufficiently in agreement with the majority of the regulations and guidelines, and I think you've done a great job to try to
Yeah.
bridge the gaps and analyze situations. And this will be one of those historical, not historical, but hysterical points that may come back, and we'll have to refine it based on the experience that you encounter as a city,
Trying to
with-
enforce it.
Right.
decisions and
Yeah.
et cetera and so forth. So it's just a work in progress, if you will, I guess. And so. but that
When you
in-
put
But
this to
if-
city council, just don't highlight that paragraph. I mean,
Yeah, I left these in just for conversation's sake. The ordinance will be clean red line. Yeah.
But if we're doing this to encourage businesses to come in, I think it's time that we move on this. And I
that-
think we're okay enough. Are we?
Yeah.
So what do
I
we
like
need
the
to do
intent.
now?
Like the intent of what we've got here.
Right.
Mhm.
And where that isn't, that's not a change. That's existing language.
It's there.
Yeah.
So we will need a recommendation from the planning commission in order to move something to the city council for potential adoption.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we need a recommendation to
Yeah,
the city council.
Madam Chair, I would make a motion that we do a positive recommendation for amendment to section 12C 600 of the North Logan City signage ordinance to include all of the recommendations submitted by staff.
I second that.
Right, great. White has made a positive recommendation on section 12C. I don't have to go through all that, do I?
Mhm.
No, I don't. To make a positive recommendation onto the city onto the city council. All in favor?
I,
Okay. Moving on to them.
Okay, opposed. So,
Great. Any opposed? I'm sorry.
No.
All right. Great. Next one.
board member.
Scott, let's move on to our item number 2.
this is the one I came.
Great. This is the one Jeff came for.
All right.
Okay, Scott. give
Thank
us
you,
some
commissioners. So this one is, I hope, maybe a little bit more straightforward. As you're aware, we are building city offices in the Civic Center just right here next door to us. It's actually on the same parcel as this library and the North Park Police Department. So I'm going to pull up the GIS just to show you the bird's eye of the parcel where we're actually located right now. Just to give you some context. Okay, so here's the parcel, city-owned parcel, right? We got the library here on the west and the police department there on the east. I'm going to turn on our zoning layer to show you the existing zoning in this area. So this layer that just popped on shows that this yellow color, all the surrounding color is all zoned R112. It's residential, basically quarter-acre zone, right? The R112 zone is not just residential. It includes other items in the list of permitted and conditional uses. For example, the library is listed as a permitted use. The fire or the police station is listed as a permitted use, a fire station as well. What we found when we were reviewing our plans, our building permit plans for the city offices, is that city office, government office, is not a permitted use in the zone. It's actually silent. So we need to adjust our code to say that local government offices are a permitted use. So what we have is a proposed ordinance, a text amendment to the zoning ordinance to inject this use. There's 2 different uses that are fairly similar. I went ahead and listed them both as permitted, but government admin office and city administrative office in the R1 zones was not listed previously, and we have since, as part of this proposal, shown it as a permitted use. So since this is a text amendment, it technically is a legislative action that necessitates a public hearing and recommendation from the Planning Commission. So we're going through those formalities here today. Yeah, we need to open a public hearing, get any public comment, and also the Planning Commission's feedback on this before we move forward for potential adoption with the City Council.
Great. Thank you, Scott.
Yep.
All right, we will open up our public hearing. Nobody talk until we're done, okay? Do I need to read you all of this again? Okay. Any comments from the public on this amendment? All right, we will close our public hearing. Now, commissioners, you can say what you'd like to say about this. Any comments?
Scott, do we have any kind of a plat to show where those 2 buildings are going to occur on that land?
I do. Alan, do you know where? Guide me to where they are. I'd have to sign in. Okay. Say I could sign into City Inspect, but
They deny their own building permit.
Perfect.
We need to get you a microphone, Alan.
Yeah. While you're pulling that up, Scott, is it cleaner to just rezone that parcel to something that already?
it could. We don't have a zone that is very specifically set aside for civic uses. We don't have like a civic zone.
Okay.
So if you look at the R112 zoning classification, at all of the permitted and conditional uses, there's a lot of civic uses that are permitted. This is kind of an oversight where it should have been in there since we're already allowing a library and a police office, things like that. This probably should have been permitted all along. It just simply wasn't at the time that it was drafted and hasn't been an issue until now where we're looking to build new city offices.
So the thing is, we have great power here, right?
You do.
No,
We could say, no way. No permit. Then what
So-
happens? We
So the
can't?
City council.
We,
just
we
ignores
can,
it.
but the city council can override
Okay,
us. so-
okay. I'm just giving you something to talk about.
So the parcel where our city offices currently reside, what is that zoned as?
Which one?
Oh,
R 112, is it?
Yes.
Okay, so
that was it.
It's
Might be a mixed
multifamily.
use, actually.
There's
For commercial.
apartments right there.
Mixed
It says it in
Well,
here.
Oh, the current.
RE1. or no?
So I'll see where we're at.
commercial.
Mixed use.
It's-
It's got.
It might be a commercial zone. Yeah, here we are.
Home-based business.
Yeah, but wouldn't that be
See,
multi
community commercial.
CC?
Yeah,
Okay.
No.
it is immediately adjacent to R 112. Of that. Makes it any less.
So
So-
city offices are just a permitted use in the CC zoning as well, and,
Mhm,
okay.
mhm.
So this is for this specific city office?
No, just.
And the civic center, yeah, so this is
Proposed
part of it.
permits
Yeah. it's R-
Yeah.
For any R1.
For any R1. So my question is,
Yeah.
Do we open?
Where am I? Oh, right here, sorry, I was looking,
change it for-
like looking right at it, sorry. Yeah,
It's everywhere.
I-
You can change that.
I think we need to be more specific. R1 zones is everywhere.
Yeah.
But
so this is my question.
And then.
I would do
We
it.
see city.
In an R1 zone, which is a acre,
so R 112
Residential.
is quarter
R1.
acre,
Yeah.
RE1 is 1 acre.
okay, so residential, so if it's just city administration buildings, which are beautiful, that's great. I don't think people want the city garage with the snow plow in their backyard.
Yeah,
So how do we?
let me go.
Where's the signs gonna be?
It's right above it.
Hopefully it's
actually.
gonna
have a whole
I'll
bunch
show
of
you.
different.
Hopefully it's a cycle.
Actually, if you
I
really
wanna
want to
see
switch,
I want to see your color palette right now.
Well, this is a question. I want you to answer this question because we don't want this to happen to people.
sure. So just to dovetail off of the signage, government signs are exempt from the sign. ordinance.
We wouldn't expect anything different.
Yeah, but they are. It's kind of funny.
What do you bet they put a pole sign out there, guys?
Exceeds to exceed
32
20
feet off the
feet.
ground. Yeah.
326.
Okay, we're having too much fun. Be
City
quiet.
office.
Let's hear what Scott
So-
has to say.
So these are administrative offices, government admin office, city admin office. So
I
it's not like a work shed. We could look at the definitions of them, but it's not like a contractor's storage yard or, one of those other uses that is a little bit more specific.
Because it's gonna be between here and the police department. Nobody's gonna be. Because the sheds are over south.
I'm wondering if and I kind of think maybe this is what Nan was getting to a little bit earlier, but I'm kind of wondering if we can be more specific here with this particular plot of land versus says R1 zones.
So the
Now,
R,
I recognize that no one is going to be building city
Except for the
centers
city.
and
Right.
et cetera and so forth in R1 zones. But you see. what I'm
Well,
But we
getting at?
don't
It's
want to leave it up
broad-
to somebody to guess about it.
Yeah, broad brush.
Well, but so what we're doing, we're asking, it already allows for libraries and police stations and fire stations and these things that are permitted uses. City administration buildings were left off the list. All those other things are already permitted in those.
they are, so the R 112 is technically, it is residential, primarily residential. But if you look at the whole list of all the permitted and conditional
Sure.
uses, there's a lot more to the R 112 than just residential.
Yep.
Like I'd mentioned, the police station, the library, those are both civic uses that are permitted. They're not even conditionally permitted. They're just permitted uses in the R 112. If you look at the definition here in the code for a government administrative office, it says any administrative business office. So I think that kind of clarifies, we're not going to have a storage shed for the public works department per se. hopefully that gives a little bit of comfort under that definition.
Okay,
Gonna be-
I'm okay with that.
You're gonna be dumping gravel
We
and
just say
salt
government.
and
There will be
We
some
just-
construction for
Yeah.
a few years.
Federal government in here.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Any other
Oh, I'm comfortable with
thoughts?
this.
Mike, are you okay with that? Yes, no,
Yeah, we're good on this. end.
Yeah,
all right, then we need a recommendation, a positive recommendation. Somebody,
I'll,
please.
I'll make a motion that we approve for recommendation an amendment to section 12C-1001 of the North Logan City Ordinance, zoning ordinance to permit government administration offices to be used in R1 zones.
Do we
how
have
about I
a,
second that?
and city administrative offices, so government and city, correct, not just everything that's included.
all right, and.
Whatever's in the code,
You seconded
says
it?
government.
All right, we've had a motion to send a positive recommendation to city council to amend section 112 North Logan City Ordinance, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we'll send a positive recommendation to the city council for that. Thank you.
Thank you, commissioners.
Right on schedule.
All right,
Ooh, look at that.
Scott. Yeah, it's amazing that you guys be quiet.
Okay, I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but we did want to give you guys an update to the convention we attended last week. It's called the Utah League of City and Towns. It's a big convention for, local government administration to, pass around ideas, learn new things that are going on, catch up on legislative items, those types of things. Couple of things I wanted to just run past. When and if you guys have time, feel free to dig into this as deep as you would like. But I did make a couple of notes and I provided some links to a few topics that we had talked about that I felt like were unique and that could be applicable to us in our situation. The first of which was I took a tour of what is called Mill Creek Commons. And for those of you who are maybe not aware, Mill Creek has been a neighborhood of Salt Lake forever and ever, right? It's suburbia, but they recently incorporated back in 2017. And as part of that incorporation process, they had to go through a general plan. They had to set up their own city offices, ordinances, everything had to start basically fresh. And one of the first things that they were trying to tackle through their general plan process was we don't have an identity. We don't have a downtown. We don't have a sense of place. I mean, we really are just this suburbia in the middle of, Wasatch Front, Salt Lake metro area. So actually, I want to go to a different link here. What we had seen, they just right off of the bat, they put together a bond and they raised some money to put in as this common area. And so what you don't see in these pictures is what is around it yet. So the city floated a bond, about $20 million. They put in this common area, multi-use, multi-season common area. It's a roller skate rink in the summer, an ice skate rink in the winter, has food trucks. There's a stage for concerts. They have food and beverage around the perimeter. They also have, this is on the other end, this public facility. There's a big conference room upstairs that people can rent out for whatever function they want to do. And this is all generating revenue for the city. So yeah, the city did go into debt to put this in, but it's also the revenue that they generate from this is paying back that bond. But what it did was it was a catalyst for development in a downtown area and the impetus to their city center, their identity as a new city. So it's kind of cool to see how they went about, how do we kick off a new city? How do we get a branding and an identity? And this was one of the very first things that they tackled after they put their general plan together. That was kind of cool, kind of unique. We're also trying to do something similar in our city center area. We have some land set aside for a common area or a park. This might be something that we could glean some information off of in the future if we wanted a case study to look at. So anyways, that was one cool thing we had seen. These links here will show you more about it. There's more detail about that in there. The other thing I wanted to fill you in on is Utah State has been conducting for the past several years a well-being survey, and it's a statewide survey with multiple cities in the state, and it's a survey that is measuring various, they call them social determinants of well-being. So they're measuring a bunch of different variables such as safety and access to opportunity and public health related questions. All sorts of things go into this. And I thought it was interesting. I didn't know that this was being done, but it's free to us. We don't pay anything. We did almost 300 surveys in North Logan as part of our jurisdiction. And what they provide us is this massive report of analytics to show what is important to our community. You know, how do they view their well-being? And I thought it was kind of cool because if, for example, we start a general plan rewrite or a general plan update process, this is really, really valuable data to help us determine what our goals should be. What do we want to focus on as a community? How do we want to improve? And this is a good measuring stick to start off of. And this is free data. Anybody that knows, if you try to go out and collect primary data, it's extremely expensive, takes a lot of time, and the outcome is never that as good as you hope it is. But with 300 surveys, you know, that's a pretty good statistical significance. So anyways, I want to let you know that this exists. Feel free to dive into the report there. There's some cool things in there. But as far as some quick takeaways from this, we do rank fairly high in the list. We're grouped with other cities that are classified as rapid growth communities or communities that are growing pretty quickly compared to other communities in the state. So it's kind of measuring us against our municipal peers, so to speak. That's kind of cool. So feel free to look into that. We'll definitely be pulling from this data in the future as we're, you know, visioning for our community and setting goals for our community. Okay, lastly, there was a session on strategies to make growth less obnoxious. And there was some cool stuff in this. Again, this was put together by a couple of the folks out of the planning department in Mill Creek. And what I took away from this, and I'm not going to bore you going through this whole slideshow, but what I took away from this is, you know, urban design goes a long way to blending development into the background. Obviously, we know development is what it is. You know, it's not going to go away. But how we accommodate for it and how we mitigate against it is what will make the best outcome. If we have to accommodate it, let's do it in a way that is most or least obnoxious. So a couple of things that let me just see if I can scroll through and show you a couple of interesting things here. Street trees. Very important. Obviously, street trees hide all manners of sin, you know, beyond the sidewalk. You know, people that don't maybe maintain their property as nicely as the next guy down the road. It blends into the background and it doesn't draw your attention as much, and it provides shade and it's nicer from a climate perspective. Trees go a long way in every single regard. They're annoying for the engineers and, you know, the public works folks to maintain stormwater and all sorts of stuff, but it's worth the headache for sure. The other thing that they had mentioned was, let's see, I'm trying to get an example here. This was an example of we call them a missing middle housing development. Missing middle is something that is in between a townhome and a high-rise apartment complex. We're talking, you know, fourplexes and things like that. If we ever were to get to a point where a fourplex were, you know, something we were to develop, one thing that they had mentioned is it's nice to have a nice dividing wall. Solid masonry wall is a nice transition between maybe a multiplex and maybe an adjacent small single family residential zone. So you have good transitions between different products, housing product types. Let's see. Something else I wanted to point out here. Another thing they had mentioned is as you become more dense, so in areas where maybe you're looking to upzone and provide more density, a way to mitigate some of that density is to provide a high frequency of connectivity. So you don't have massive long blocks with visual mass that isn't broken up. You don't want to have, you know, a lot of density that is on a single plane and that there's no breakup of that density. So the more dense you get, you want to have more connections, trails, street network, just to break it up a bit and not have it all congregated in a single visual mass. That's kind of an interesting takeaway. But anyways, if you guys want to flip through any more of this, there are some cool urban design principles that we could employ in areas where if we at some point get more dense, like in the city center, for example, we can try to mitigate and make it less obnoxious. But anyways, you guys have any questions about ULTC?
So what is this that we're seeing on this slide with the two maps there?
So this was something in Farmington that they had talked about. This was between 2009, 2018. This is kind of the Farmington station area. So here's I-15. And this is kind of that dense commercial area, commercial district. There's kind of the Cabela's kind of over in this area over here, some of the bigger box, but in here is kind of where they have like the Nike store and REI. There's an Apple store over there. They have some mixed use development in this area. They have a movie theater. But what they're trying to show here is instead of having fewer street networks, have more streets in a more dense area, break that up so you don't have as big of blocks. And obviously it becomes more pedestrian friendly the more dense you get. So trails and such are important in that regard.
Okay.
So we can just go to Utah League of Cities and look this up.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that'll be on there that kind of summarize this conference, whatever you want to call it. But if you want to look in the folder for this planning commission, I've provided a couple of links there. You guys can kind of flip through at your leisure.
Yep. Great.
Yep.
Looks good.
Thank you, Scott. That's
Yeah.
interesting.
I have one comment. I was visiting my sister down in the community called Daybreak.
Daybreak.
And I've never been in such a confused area in my whole life. Had I not had Google Maps, I'd have never been able to get in or out.
It doesn't follow the
been
grid
tracked.
network. Yeah,
Kinda
that's true.
So
So I think Daybreak is interesting in a lot of regards. It's a case study that we study in planning school as a best practice. There are some things that could do better. Wayfinding may be one. But yeah, it doesn't follow the traditional grid pattern that you may be used to, where everything's laid out in blocks and streets, where it's all numerically organized. But in some regards, it is some of the best planning in the state and in the country, to be honest.
one more comment on that, all of the corners were roundabouts rather than direct corners. And the Google Maps would say, well, go to this one, take the second exit, go to this one, take the first exit, go to the next one, take the third exit. And then by the time you get to where you're going and try to remember that backwards.
Yeah. So you have Google Maps.
That's
to get you
exactly
back.
what
We're getting to a point where we don't look out our windshields. We just stare at the mapping, right? You got to
That's
look
right.
at your surroundings every once in a while. Yeah.
Scott, thank you. Do you have any staff business?
I don't necessarily. I think looking at the calendar, our next meeting will be on the 3rd of November. And I don't know that we'll have anything on the agenda yet. I'm sure we'll have something. I don't have on the top of my head an item. If there's nothing, a week prior, maybe we'll cancel it. But at this time, that's when the next meeting will be. I was on the 3rd. I think in conjunction with what the council decided last night, looking at the December schedule, they had decided to hold their meeting on the 14th of December in lieu of the week prior, because there is a city staff Christmas party on the 7th. So we could hold a planning commission on the 8th and the 22nd, or if you feel like the 22nd is getting a bit too close to Christmas and it's going to be hard to get everybody here and have a quorum, that maybe we stick with the single meeting on the 15th. Do you guys have any thoughts on that? Do you guys know your plans yet? Are you going to be
So
around?
not on the 1st then?
I guess we could do it on the 1st. Is that?
Do we
It's
do
another one of these weird months where it's
I think a single meeting in December is a good idea.
Yeah.
Whatever day, first or
Yeah, just tell us whatever
15th.
day.
Okay.
Put it on.
On the eighth,
So
We should probably align with the city council if we can, right? So.
Are they just doing one?
they are, yeah, they're
Kids are
just
gonna
holding it on
stop.
Wednesday, the 14th.
We're doing one the 14th. Okay.
Yeah, so if we were to stick to the schedule, November would be the 3rd and the 17th. And then if we were to do only one in December, it would be the 1st or the 15th.
Got it.
Yeah. So it might be good to do the 15th just to space it out and have one in the middle of the month rather than making potentially an
Okay.
applicant have to wait almost 60 days to be on the next schedule.
Delete that one.
Sounds
Depending
good.
on
Okay.
activity.
Nothing on the
Let's tentatively say
Just the
that.
15th.
You
How's
guys, the
that?
15th.
Okay. Okay.
Other than that, I don't have any other business.
All right. Dwight had something he wanted to
Well,
talk
first
about.
of all, a question, are we in the process of considering a roundabout on 1600 East and Hyde Park in connection with the city of Hyde Park there? Is that a-
Want
1600
to speak to that,
east.
Alan?
All right.
Thank you, Alan.
1600.
So if you scroll up there, it's at 31 or 3400 north, 2nd south and 16th east. Hyde Park recently submitted with their COG application, sorry, Council of Governments. There's a percentage sales tax that goes towards funding for certain projects. This would be what's called a spot improvement. It's limited to $300,000 in a request. Hyde Park requested funds for a roundabout at that corner. It ranked relatively high amongst all the different projects. That doesn't mean it will get funded, but it does put it in a good position to receive funding in the coming weeks from the Council of Governments. It would be a roundabout at that corner. There is a subdivision, I believe, going in on parcel 10, so the northeast corner there. So they would put in their corner. The county is the southeast. There's a small portion of county property on the southeast of this intersection. The northwest, Hyde Park would have to work with, and the southeast is part of the Mahogany Ridge open space. And that one, North Logan would have to work with Mahogany Ridge, and we would have to put a little bit of money into the pot for this particular project for it to move forward. For that roundabout on that roadway. Now, neither one of these roadways are a regionally significant road. There's only a few roads throughout North Logan City and Hyde Park that are regionally significant. I can just list them. So 12th East is a regionally significant road because it goes all the way from Logan to Smithfield. 2nd West is a regionally significant road that will go all the way from the south side of Logan to Smithfield. 2nd East, which is Wolfpack Way. 3100 North is a regionally significant road that's already been in and improved. I'm trying to think if there's any others. I think that's it for North Logan and the regionally significant roadways. Our project that we are applying for funds, we ranked relatively high as well. In fact, the top three, us, Hyde Park, and the Nibley project are the top three. We're looking at expanding. It's kind of an ongoing project, 200 east of Walmart. So all the way from Culver's to the roundabout at 18th North. And our application is for engineering. So we would apply, receive funding to do the engineering study, and then expand that roadway instead of just kind of a place that has medians and doesn't have medians as you go through that roadway. It would have 2 lanes in each direction and a center median going down the
And
roadway.
where's that again, Alan?
So here's Walmart right here.
So one was the big box right there. on
This
the-
is 14th North and this is 2nd East behind Walmart.
What you're saying this, and I don't see where you.
Sorry,
Smart.
the big box on the right is Lowe's. There's Walmart.
Okay.
All the way up. So
Mm-hmm.
you have 2 lanes in each direction and a center median. There's a dangerous intersection right down the north side of Walmart, and we would correct that.
Mhm.
Without getting the traffic.
Mhm.
So that's our proposed project. That is a regionally significant road, 2nd East,
Mhm.
all the way from Millville to Smithfield in the
Yeah.
future.
I think that's what he's talking about. They put like-
Sorry, probably too much information to answer that simple question.
No,
No, that's
great.
interesting.
And we have, if that's approved, Hyde Park gets approved, do we have the resources to assist with that?
Yeah, our contribution would be relatively small. We would have to add it to our capital improvement plan because it's not on our capital improvement plan. then it would be eligible for impact fees. And that's what we would use to pay for this. Impact fees are related to growth within the community, and that would be this type of project. Similar to this project as well.
So with the, you're proposing the light as you're coming out of the Walmart turning left on Second, is that what you're saying, the light would?
Yeah, north, south, and the T.
Yeah.
It basically comes in
Okay.
T's at that intersection. So it'd be a traffic light, a
Awful
lot of
intersection.
pedestrian near misses.
Yeah.
So we put in those temporary measures as a flasher. As you go through there, the flashing beacons, is what they
Yeah.
call them, for the crossing. So that's kind of a Band-Aid solution right now. We need a full-blown solution, so it's very safe for individuals there.
Yes.
So Alan, if that Hyde Park Road is not regionally significant, how come they rank so high? Is it just traffic flow on that intersection?
Just the relative benefit, cost benefit analysis. So it's a spot improvement or regionally significant roadway. That doesn't necessarily designate how high or low it will rank. It just sets caps. So if you are on a regionally significant road, you don't have a cap. You can request as much money as it costs to do the improvements. If it's not on there, it's lower. But yes, it's kind of an odd process where if it's not a regionally significant road, or whether it is, it doesn't determine really the ranking in the process.
Okay.
More how well you're lined up for engineering and how many people it's going to benefit is really what they look at.
So you said it would be impact fees?
Mhm.
What, the houses getting built, who pays the impact fees?
Houses being built, that's a very good question. So homes being built and businesses being built, they pay an impact fee into the
Yeah.
system.
And so that Hyde Park Road, that gets funded by some impact fees too. The circle, what do you call it?
Roundabout.
Roundabout.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that would be a small portion coming out of North Logan's coffers. The majority would come out of Hyde Park and the COG to fund that, and the
Okay.
county. In this, we would pay our percentage, which is usually about an 8% match for out of impact fees for this roadway.
On this one.
You said 8%.
Usually around 8%,
8%.
anywhere from 6.77 up to 10% is what they accept.
Mhm.
So we went on medium amount.
Alan, can I go back on this right north of Walmart? Is that the street that's on very north of Walmart, or is it 1800 north?
1600 north goes right along the north side of Walmart, and that would be where the traffic light would be located as it meets 200 east.
Okay,
If anyone's ever driven east on that road, you know what a
It's a
tough
pain.
intersection that
It's
is.
yeah, and the one on the south of Walmart is identical as far as problems, as far as I'm concerned.
That, yes, and that one wouldn't be eligible for a light because it's not a true intersection, it's a parking lot exit.
That's a T.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
so that would just have a true median now. Right now, it doesn't have a median, so you can't really turn left into that. area.
Yeah. Okay,
Dwight, something else?
Yeah, this is the one that might bring out the tar and feathers. So.
All right.
Alan's gonna.
all right,
Yeah.
Jeff, get ready.
I've been struggling with this. How do we comply with our plans for low, moderate income housing and state requirements and et cetera and so forth? I'm just wondering, and how do we get people to come back and settle here? Do we have any provisions or zoning that would allow modular homes and or double wide trailers, not single, but double wides that would you'd probably want to have a third of an acre per lot or per category, but I don't know, is that a possibility?
So-
Tiny house neighborhood,
Yeah, that's what I was saying, townhouse.
And
Tiny house.
and in
Yeah.
not a
in
townhouse, tiny. house.
some
Yeah.
communities, these are, it can be very nice residential areas and certainly get people started in a place to live at a reasonable
So I
amount.
guess
Anyway, just
if you guys want to look in the news, I think Salt Lake City just approved their first tiny home community.
Yeah.
That's why.
you know, I want to go look at that and see what you think. It's an interesting concept. I think it's meant to house homeless and that, you know, it may have some success. I know Austin has had some success in a tiny home community, housing veterans and individuals on the low end of the income spectrum. As far as North Logan City goes, any home that is built has to meet building code, has to have a permanent foundation, permanently affixed to the ground. And so technically you could buy a modular home and affix it to the ground as long as it meets building code. There's not much we can do from an architectural standpoint to limit what it looks like. Somebody could come in with a set of plans that looks like a double wide and build a double wide, you know, stick frame building that looks like a double wide, and we don't have anything that says you can't.
Right.
Really, the affordability comes in lot size and the cost of land and infrastructure to support that lot. So, you know, just to have a patch of dirt that has utilities stubbed to it, that's where the majority of the cost comes from. The house that then sits on the lot is how you make up a little bit of the cost difference, but mostly the cost of development is infrastructure and the cost of dirt.
Interesting.
So it is a possibility, but
Yeah,
Sort of.
I think if
They
the
have to
free
buy
market were to move,
150,000.
they would build something
It's sort of
small.
a possibility.
I mean, that's where the private market comes in.
If there's a
Right,
demand
and-
for it.
and-
yeah.
Right. So, you know, developers are probably not running out to go do that
No.
because they can put a custom home on that same plot of land and
Yeah.
make a ton of money.
Or an apartment. home.
That's what really drives that. Because you can put them on a concrete foundation, which would meet, you know, any of our standards. It's just that you can do that, or you can put a custom built home on there and make a lot more money.
As long as there's a market for those homes, they'll keep building them.
Okay,
thank you.
thank you. Dwight. Anybody else have any questions, concerns? All right, then we need a motion to adjourn.
I so move, Madam Chairman.
I second. Okay, it's been moved and seconded to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.